I was looking through the real estate ads for fun and I ran across this one listing that I found very interesting at 1420 Paloma Way, Northwest DC. It wasn't interesting just because of its amenities and its huge listing price, but it's interesting because of where it is. This newly renovated space is located in an alley of a busy business district. It's in a notorious and historic section of DC. It's in Logan Circle in the heart of the U Street corridor. This listing isn't on a main street, it's in an alley because this is a DC alley house. An alley's main purpose has historically hid our community's more ugly part of city living, like hiding the trash cans and transformers, electric meters, telephone poles, and even space for parking your car. But this new luxury carriage house was renovated by its owners 7 years ago in 2015. And this house doesn't resemble anything to be hidden away in a back alley. This 2,700 square foot home used to be a warehouse and then a machinist garage, but now represents in itself as DC's high living. Starting with the 10-foot mahogany front doors, the house opens on the main level with an open floor plan, so the place is flooded with natural light from its skylights. The Zillow real estate listing describes the house as having exposed brick and beams, a gourmet kitchen, a double-sided fireplace, and a half bath on the first floor. The second floor has 3 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms, an office or a den, and a stairway leading from the office to the rooftop deck. The deck has its own kitchen space with a grill, sink, countertops, and a lot of seating. Hardwood floors are all throughout the house. Included in the sale is a separately deeded lot in the back of the house that can fit 4 cars. On the outside of the house, you can still see the old business sign in white letters painted on the side wall. Brad House, one of the listing agents, said that we have learned that many real estate agents and residents that have lived here in Logan Circle never even knew Paloma Way existed. Well, I personally knew that DC had a dozen or so alley houses because I delivered food to these strange addresses a few years ago with Uber Eats, Postmates, and DoorDash. But this one, I was not aware of. Because of the sale price, description, and its address, I am very interested in finding this place. So, I hopped on a train and I had to go find it. I took the metro to the U Street African American Civil War Memorial Cardozo train station in Northwest DC. As soon as I came upstairs to the street level, I could see across the street the historic Lincoln Theater. And no, this is not the theater where President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. That was Ford's Theater in downtown DC. But this theater is named after him. A jokester Washingtonian would see a naive tourist in the area and lie to them about the true history of the theater because they thought giving misinformation to visitors in DC funny. Sorry about that. But this Lincoln Theater has a historical black past. DC was segregated when the Lincoln Theater first opened its doors 100 years ago in 1922. The U Street corridor was the center of culture and prominence for DC's black community, but it also influenced black audiences across America. The Lincoln Theater even inspired a poem by the great Langston Hughes called Lincoln Theater. The theater was originally home to many vaudeville acts and silent movies, and in 1927 it became a beautiful cinema venue with a ballroom downstairs called the Lincoln Colonnade. The Lincoln Theater website history section will explain the area's significance as this. With banks, bowling alleys, dance halls, cabarets, movie houses, restaurants, skating rinks, and many other neighborhood businesses being built for, managed by, and in some cases owned by, black Americans in the time of segregation. Actress, singer, and DMV native Pearl Bailey dubbed the neighborhood Black Broadway, and the name stuck. DC's Black Broadway predated and influenced Harlem's Renaissance, touted by the Afro-American newspaper at the time as perhaps the largest and finest theater for colored people exclusively anywhere in the U.S. The building has catered to artists, presidents, cinema stars, boxers, and hundreds of thousands of Washingtonians. Performers at the Lincoln Theater and Colonnade included legends such as Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Cab Calloway, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Fats Waller, Bessie Smith, Lena Horne, Sarah Vaughan, and Pearl Bailey. Even President Franklin Delano Roosevelt enjoyed the Lincoln Colonnade, which hosted his official birthday party there in 1942 and in 1943, leading the Afro-American newspaper to say, "Color, prejudice, and discrimination today takes a holiday." Next door to the Lincoln's Theater is Ben's Chili Bowl. This restaurant is famous for its burgers and hash smokes. A hash smoke is a large hot dog covered in mustard, onion, and Ben's homemade chili. For the black community, this has been a place of safety and a haven for those in need. Ben's Chili Bowl has kept its doors open during DC's 1968 riot and has become a landmark of the civil rights movement. Ben's Chili Bowl opened on U Street on August 22, 1958. It was founded by Ben Ali and his wife, Virginia. Ben passed away in 2009, and his wife is still the owner of the restaurant. On its website, Ben's Chili Bowl displays a timeline of its historic milestones. From presidents to celebrities, the restaurant has become a symbolic place to visit. The walls of its original location are covered in pictures of many famous people. The support Ben's Chili Bowl has provided for the black community has become more evident of why going out of your way to visit this restaurant is important. Whether you're a politician, a musician, or a famous basketball player, it sends out a meaningful message. A quote from their website says, "DC's residents have a long history of bouncing back from hard times." On multiple occasions, the restaurant showed its support to the civil rights movement. For instance, in April 1968, Ben has donated food to the Poor People's Campaign, the movement that was organized by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Earlier that same April, after the assassination of Dr. King, the DC riots took place. Bravely, Ben's Chili Bowl remained open during the riots. Stokely Carmichael obtained special permission to keep Ben's open after curfew to provide food and shelter to those working to restore order after the riots. Thanks to things like that, Ben's quickly became a landmark of DC and the civil rights movement. That's why the restaurant has grown to become a must-see when you come to DC. It has brought people from all over the world. It was even Barack Obama's choice restaurant 10 days before his inauguration in 2009 to the White House. Beyond its delicious chili, this is a restaurant that has created community and built on the structure of a family-owned business that went from a small restaurant on the corner of U Street Northwest to 13 locations in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So now I want you to walk with me down this historic street so I can find this renovated carriage house. But first, let's cross back across the street and go in the correct direction. I was trying my best not to include anyone in my pictures, but of course, people walk the streets even in 95-degree heat. So there's a lot of apartment buildings, restaurants, major retailers, as well as small mom and pop stores. There's plenty of outdoor seating for restaurants and cafes. But before we keep going, I want to make another stop on our journey of Black Broadway, and that is Nat Turner's Way. Nat Turner was recognized in the Washington Post when DC named an alley after the blues musician in 2015. Actually, Turner used to hang out in this same alley in the early 1970s. So by the time he died in 2004, at age 74, Turner had become one of DC's most accomplished blues and jazz singers, usually performing in clubs near the alley that now has his name. Okay, so now we only have one more block to go. I can tell that I only have another block to go because I'm close. The Reeves Center is across the street. Okay, so now I'm walking up to the next alley, so let's check out the street sign. Oh, okay, that's it. Paloma Way. And the two other cross street alleys are Waverly Place and Treader Way. Well, this alley looks like any other alley I've seen before. There's a few parking spaces. Oh, looks like this is the back door to the City First Bank. So let's keep on walking. You know, it's funny how you can always find some graffiti in DC alleyways, even if it's on a truck. Okay, so let's go a little further. Now, which way do I go? Oh, hey, is that it? Oh, I found it. Yeah, it looks interesting. Yeah, it's definitely in an interesting spot. I don't know if I would move in here for the $2.3 million that it was bought for, but it's interesting. You know, during the 1850s and the 1860s, following after the Civil War, DC had trouble finding shelter for its increasing population, and alleyways presented themselves as a free-for-all for the developers. Historian James Burchard described in his 1980 book, his book was called Alley Life in Washington, Family, Community, Religion, and Folklore in the City, 1850 to 1970. Well, in his book he describes how developers had built housing for poor people in the alleys at the same time they was constructing grand townhouses for the wealthier residents along the city's main streets. Burchard wrote in his book, "Their implicit assumption seemed to be that the middle classes would live on the streets, while working class people would reside in the alleys." For some time, this system did meet the housing demand, although unequally. Alley houses ranged from ramshackle to robust. And while these areas of high density produced tightly knit communities of working class people, alleys could also be home to disease, drunken debauchery, and violent crime. Most alleyways were centers of domestic life and shared community, where children could play without fear of being near traffic, and the neighbors were in such close proximity to each other it demanded interaction. But the explosion of these alley communities was an annoyance to the city's power brokers. In 1892, Congress enacted legislation that prohibited building dwellings in alleyways less than 30 feet wide that weren't connected to the city's utilities. By 1897, alley developments housed 17,244 people. According to the police department census, 16,046 of these people were black, and 1,198 were white. Burchard believes that the actual number of alley residents was likely to be higher, considering that some census takers reported fearing going down into some alleys. The city tried to improve safety and housing quality in its alleys, but it displaced the neediest residents. Now I want to take you back across town where I know there are some alley houses. And while we're over there, I have something else to show you. But come with me to Northeast DC to the 8th Street corridor. We're going in the alley behind the Atlas Theater. The Atlas was originally built in 1938, but went dark in 1968 because of the riots after the assassination of Dr. King. Most of the businesses were destroyed on 8th Street, and most people left the city and moved to the suburbs. According to the Atlas Theater website, the Atlas was dark and empty for 33 years. Jane Lang, a philanthropist and lawyer, started renovations in 2001, and in 2006, the Atlas opened its doors again. Okay, so here's the adorable little houses I delivered food to in the middle of the alley. But since I'm here, I want to walk around the rest of the alley to see what else is here. During the 1870s, the Board of Health tore down about 300 alley houses, and between 1906 and 1911, it repaired more than 300 alley houses. In 1912, a group called the Monday Evening Club counted 3,201 alley houses within D.C., according to historian James Borchard. By 1927, the number of occupied alley houses had decreased to 1,346 in Northwest and Southwest D.C. Overall, there was a 40% reduction in alley houses, and having a car enabled those with means to move to the less congested suburbs, relieving some of the housing pressure off the city. By 1934, alley houses were dwindling and deteriorating. The city seldom sent trash collection to the alleyways, so rodents flocked to the piles of trash, and related health issues spread. Alley dwelling owners allowed their properties to fall into disrepair, but when they did make improvements, they rolled those costs into higher rents for their tenants. The district government considered these communities slums and formed a new organization called the Alley Dwelling Authority just to clear them all out. Efforts to end alley dwelling had a strong ally in First Lady Ellen Wilson, wife of the 28th President Woodrow Wilson. She was inspired by progressive urban reform movements in cities like New York and Chicago. She led a crusade against DC's alley houses until her death in 1914. But the Second World War slowed that effort down, so the Alley House Dwellings Authority and its outright ban on alley houses failed. Alley use also shifted during this time. Instead of being dedicated almost exclusively to housing, many alley dwellings and stables in Northwest DC were converted into automobile service stations and garages. In Blagden Alley Northwest, 42 of its 57 alley dwellings were converted to businesses or garages. Pierre Lafont's plan for the city featured large blocks that developers subdivided into long, narrow residential lots with wealthy houses on the street-facing side and the working-class settlements in the alleys. They were kind of a medieval character in contrast to the grand streets and avenues of D.C., said Thor Norson, Deputy Chief of Planning and Design and Construction with the D.C. Housing Authority. The alley's close quarters created a vibrant community life, but they were also places for stables, carriage houses, and services no one wanted to see, like sick animals, prostitutes, or even any mechanical operation. Which mean alleys were designed to hide the messiness of life, but property owners recognized that they could make money by dividing their large lots and renting parts of them. The alley houses that were built attracted the city's poorest residents, people who just couldn't afford to live anywhere else. But once occupied, they were neglected. Housing stock was terrible without proper infrastructure from the city, and property owners didn't maintain these dwellings. The alleys became unsanitary and overcrowded. Nevertheless, they were tight-knit communities, and it's what many families called home. There's a Washington Post article called "Capitalizing on DC's Alleys in the Real Estate Picture," where it describes how a real estate agent and artist, Giorgio Faricio, who came to DC in the early 1980s looking for an affordable studio, he had found some alley dwellings perfect, but they weren't legal to live in or to work in. So he lobbied DC to change the zoning codes, and after 7 years, he was successful. He bought several buildings, rented studios to artists, and watched the alleys turn into attractive places for commerce and living. The article also says that today, he now has one building, originally designed as a community stable for horses and carriages. His studio was still there, and he rents space to another artist. So now with DC's alley house codes updated, there's been an explosion of building in DC since 2018, and developers are putting in building applications every day. So now I want to show you the latest alley to be developed. Travel with me from H Street to C Street Northeast. Union Square Partners and District Real Estate were approved for a zoning variance to subdivide an alley lot between C and D Streets Northeast, from 15th to 16th Street. There's a plan to build 6 two-story townhouses, and these houses have been in the works for more than a year. The floor plan will have 4 bedroom suites and a den, and each house will have a front courtyard. The 34-foot wide lots will allow for at least 2 parking spaces, and with each house, every house will have its own rooftop deck. Evan Muche of Union Square Partners said, "I am happy that we are building more single-family houses in DC. We would love to do more houses and alleys around the city." These houses are expected to break ground in mid-2023. Well, I've been reading the comments and I've gotten plenty of suggestions of places to go in DC to go visit. So I've made a list, and you can expect to see those videos in the future. To help support my page, you can donate to me via the PayPal link on my channel banner or on my About Me page. But thank you for hanging out with me. I'm Dickie D, and I will see you in the next video.